In the House, Tate Reeves. Good morning, Tate.
Hey, Paul, how are you today? I'm doing well. How are you?
Doing fine. Here to talk about what happened yesterday. Senator Hughes was on with me, and we were talking about your ads and the press conference, and this seems to be now this is new ground for all of us in the last 10 or 15 years with active Republican primaries, and it's a sign of the future, and might as well get used to it because it's going to be like that for a while. As far as having active primaries and like the old days of the Democrats. So it's one of those things where ultimately I think it's good for the party and good for the state. Your response to yesterday where Senator Hughes said, wait a minute, you are responsible for those votes, 90-something%, 415, and your response to that.
Well, Paul, let me first say I think this is one of the reasons that talk radio is so important to the political process. It gives us the opportunity to come on and really discuss the facts surrounding the various records. And I'll begin by saying, look, Senator Hughes is not a bad guy. We just happen to disagree on some issues, and it's unfortunate that he has decided to go so negative in his campaign. But it's just politics. We have a saying in the Treasurer's office, it's hard to take politics out of politics, and this is an election year. But I think the facts are pretty clear. If you look at the fact that over the last 20 years, my opponent served in the legislature. During the first 12 and a half years that he was in the legislature, total bonded indebtedness grew almost 400%. In the last 7.5 years, total bonded indebtedness grew less than 20%, right, or about 2% a year.
I understand that, but I want to try to make this as simple as possible because I think people need to know this on both sides, regardless of who's on top, who's on bottom. The process of approving these bonds, just give us as state treasurer a little lesson. First of all, what's the process? It's got to come up before the legislature, first of all, or does it go directly to the bond commission?
No, the bond commission cannot issue any new debt that is not first authorized and approved by the legislature and signed by the governor.
It's got to be signed on. It's got to be voted by the House
and the Senate
by at least 51%, right?
Well, I think on these measures, it's actually a 2/3 vote.
It's a 2/3 vote because it's appropriation or budget.
It's financing. Correct.
Okay, so 2/3.
Some 2/3, some 60%.
Right, 2/3 of the House, let's say 60%, whatever, of the House and Senate, and then the governor has to sign it.
That's correct.
And then it does what?
And then each issuing entity. So, for instance, if it's an economic development project, then the Mississippi Development Authority or whatever other state agency is out there has to file a resolution with the State Bond Commission asking for the issuance of those bonds.
So now we've got the approval from, this is like the loan committee at a bank saying, okay, we have the approval of this. Now we got to go one step up, and let's say in most cases it's MDA, I would imagine. Then they say, okay, let's issue this, and then that goes where from there?
Once they send it to the bond commission, we have what's called a working group, which consists of staff members of the Department of Finance and Administration, staff members of my office, the Treasurer's office.
All right, Finance, Treasurer's office, that's two. Staff members looking at this.
The Attorney General's office.
The Attorney General's office looks at it.
And the Governor's office.
And the Governor's office. So we got 4 different separate staffs reviewing this particular bond.
Each and every one. That is correct.
Then what happens?
Then there is a discussion at the level of staff. Then ultimately our staffs report back to the 3 members of the bond commission who
members of the bond commission are
the governor, the attorney general, and the treasurer.
Okay.
And so our staffs bring it back to us. There are times in which we all agree. There are times in which 2 of the 3 members agree. But the fact of the matter is, once there is a general agreement in principle as to what we're going to do, it is at that point that the governor, who is the only person that can put an item on the agenda as chairman of the State Bond Commission, sets the agenda, and we then, once we meet, which is randomly, we then vote on each of the agenda items.
I want to handle this in the assertions that he made. You during your period as state treasurer, when you go back and you look at his tenure, 392% increase in the first 12 and a half years, He's not by himself. I mean, he's with the members of the House. He's one member.
That's right.
And he has voted in the affirmative, is what you're saying.
Virtually every time.
Well, not all the time.
I'm virtually every time.
Okay, you voted 415 times according to his press release. You were either 2 of 3 or 3 of 3 on the bond commission.
That's correct. I'm not sure.
I think he said 415, wasn't it?
I haven't counted the number of votes. I will say that I would imagine that probably includes the motions that are made to adjourn, the motions to approve the minutes from the previous meeting. There are multiple other. We have to vote 3 times on each issue, basically.
For the record, how many times you vote against the bond?
On the State Bond Commission.
On the State Bond Commission.
We have.
In his press release, it was 2 or 3 times.
I think that's probably accurate because we have this process in place such that there's an awful lot of bonds that have been authorized by the legislature that never make it to the State Bond Commission. The votes on the commission alone do not tell the whole story. For instance, Paul, in the last 7.5 years, the legislature has voted for and approved $3.4 billion in new debt. The total bonded indebtedness of the state during that same 7.5-year period has increased by $600 million. We have $1.5 billion in authorized but unissued debt.
You're losing me a little
not gone.
Some bonding bills never make it through the process, is what you're saying.
They never make it to the bond commission for us to vote on because we make a decision prior to it being on the agenda, such that there is not an actual
even those that the governor signed off on.
That is correct.
So even though the House and the Senate and the governor signed off, they never make it to the bond commission. For what reason?
For a number of different reasons. One may be that there's not a general support by 2 of the 3 members of the commission to actually issue the debt.
Is there a vote record on that and the bonds somewhere?
No, there's not a record.
Right, more on this because it's a little complicated, but I want folks to understand it on both sides. Sure. Take a quick break. Back with Tate Reeves in just a moment.